This is the Sinner review for the S-Rank Catalyst Celine. Conclusions first, she's a Catalyst, so you know she's going to be OP. S0 Celine is not really complete, so I would suggest getting S1. S3 is ideal to make her super versatile, and there are some specific conditions for max scores where you would need S5 to hit certain attack speed breakpoints. So, the Sinner who finally brings attack speed into the meta. To understand the value of attack speed, first we need to understand how it works in Path to Nowhere. If you already know, feel free to skip to the timestamp for the rest of Celine's review. But for everyone else, welcome to your first lecture at the Ring Research Institute. My name is E, and I will be your professor for Attack Speed 101. Let's begin. In programs, attack speed is basically how fast does my character attack another character. This is usually measured in seconds, and in Path to Nowhere, it's this number on a Sinner's profile. So for example, Adela hits the enemy once every second. Celine's is 0.86, which means every second she hits the enemy 0.86 times. How is that possible? Well, what it actually means is that she attacks less than once per second. So if you flip the number around and divide 1 second by 0.86 hits, you get 1.16279. So it should actually take Celine 1.16279 seconds to deal one attack. A common mistake is to assume that all games treat attack speed linearly, but that's not always true, and some use the threshold or frame system. Path to Nowhere is one such game. A linear system is if Adela gets a 30% attack speed buff and she goes from 1 attack per second to 1.3 attacks per second. However, if you do this in Path to Nowhere and count, you will see that she only deals 1.25 attacks per second, which means this game runs on a frame system like this. Now, a threshold is a certain boundary. Imagine that you're standing inside a room. The door is the boundary between this room and the next room. Once you step into the doorway, you are no longer inside the room, you've stepped into the next one. You can imagine each level of the attack speed thresholds list as a room, connected by doors. So in this room, the previous door was 1 and the next door is 1.0714. That means anyone with an attack speed between these numbers will be in here. Adela, who has 1 attack speed, has just managed to step through the previous door, so she belongs in this group. Enfer, who has 0.94 attack speed, hasn't reached 1 yet, so she's in the previous room of 0.9375. In this list, the pairs are equal to each other. We will cover how they were derived in the advanced class later, but for now, don't worry about it. What you need to know is that attack speed bonuses allow Sinners to move to other rooms. We calculate attack speed bonuses by adding all buffs together, then multiplying the Sinner's base attack speed, and checking which room the Sinner ends up in. So, for Enfer at 0.94 attack speed, if she gets 50% from Lady Pearl and 90% from Celine, that's 50 plus 90 for 140%. 0.94 multiplied by 2.4 gives us 2.256. This is more than room 7, but not enough to pass the door into room 6, so Enfer would be in 7 at 2.1429 attack speed. If we divide this by her base attack speed, this is only an actual increase of 129.968%, so 12% of the buff here isn't actually doing anything. Understanding this allows you to build your teams better, especially for Celine. A strong practical example is deciding how many shackles you want to pull on Celine and Isomer. If you pull S1 Isomer and S5 Celine, that actually only hits the same attack speed breakpoints as S2 Isomer with S2 Celine. 8 copies versus 6 copies, you know? Additionally, you can see that if you pull S5 Isomer but only S1 Celine, that's actually a worse breakpoint than S0 Isomer and S5 Celine. Of course, this table doesn't include Celine's S3 attack buff or Isomer's bonus hits on various shackles, but the breakpoints are nevertheless important too. In essence, you should aim to get one of the combos highlighted in red or S3. The non-highlighted ones are the ones that do not manage to reach the next breakpoint compared to the previous Celine shackle. So, if you want low shackles on one and high on the other, it's better to get S0 or S1 Isomer and S5 Celine. Or if you want just a few shackles on both, it's better to get S3 Celine and S2 Isomer, that kind of thing. And if you want high shackles, then S5 Isomer needs S5 Celine to hit the final breakpoint, otherwise you might as well stay at S3. Being able to calculate attack speed yourself is also useful because most online resources will assume maxed out things like ECB3 or skill levels. Not everyone will have enough materials for maxing out everything, so it's useful to know how to check your own sinners. You can see if you have Isomer's P2 at level 9 here, S5 Isomer actually fails the final breakpoint with S5 Celine except during Celine's ECB. S0 on both also results in a lost breakpoint during the ECB. So you would want to either save some consciousness crystals for Isomer and Celine, or pull shackles that avoid this issue losing damage. An important note when you do your own builds is to note that there are a few attack speed values on Sinner profiles that have been rounded up, but the system value used in game calculations are slightly different, and this has been known to matter sometimes. You can see the list here or on Sin, so just double check when you're doing calculations. This much is all you need to know to effectively determine what shackles you want to pull on a Sinner to hit whatever threshold you want. So chiefs only interested in practical applications may end your participation here. For the extra enthusiastic chiefs in class, let's move into more detailed discussion. If you are attending here, I trust you will understand, so let's not waste time and move quickly. Earlier I showed the list of attack speed thresholds, but how was the list obtained? Here's the derivation. Path to Nowhere seems to run on calculations at 15 frames per second, FPS. We currently guess this because of the Dark Zone timer running at 2967, 2960, 2953, so on and so forth. Basically, each tick is between 0.06 and 0.07 seconds long, which fits 1 second divided by 15 frames for 0.166666667. Therefore, if you take each frame from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. onwards and divide 15 by it, you obtain this full list. In Path to Nowhere, we thus count frames as being whenever the Dark Zone timer ticks once. Indeed, if there are attack speed debuffs, the list can extend even further to go down before 0.6, like so exponentially. Introducing the term exponential there is deliberate. As you move to lower attack speed, the gap between each door is smaller and smaller. Conversely, as you try to increase attack speed, the gap between each door is exponentially larger. The reason should be self-evident to everyone attending here, so all it means is attack speed is a type of buff. You should plan deliberately to avoid wasting resources or using the wrong crime band combination. The number of applications are vast, so please check it according to your personal investment levels in your MBCC. About some finer details, credits to senior researcher YX for this syllabus edition. It seems like sometimes some attacks actually fall into the previous threshold than what is stated on their base attack speed. My current theory personally is that this is due to certain Sinner animations maybe being a little longer. You can see here if we count the frames, not all of Adela's animations are exactly the same, and she has one where it seems like she uses 16 frames instead of 15 frames to attack, causing her overall attacks to slowly drift away from 1 second per attack over time. And here you can see since Lady Pro's ECB3 grants 50% attack speed, Adela hits at these times. If she meets the 1.5 threshold, we can imagine 1.5 attacks per second as 3 attacks every 2 seconds. So after landing 3 hits, 2 seconds should have passed. This is correct here, so Adela's base attack speed can be confirmed as 1, and the drift we saw earlier is likely either due to a minor bug or, as I theorized, some animation issues. Speaking of animation, the fact Path to Nowhere relies on frames and animations to perform attacks is the logic behind animation cancelling. Basically, every character has a wind-up animation where they prepare to attack, and then they have a frame where they actually execute the attack, and then a wind-down animation which moves them back to a starting pose. These 3 phases keep repeating so that the animation looks smooth to us. Animation cancelling moves or uses a skill of the Sinner to force them to skip the wind-down animation and start the next attack immediately, forcing a faster attack speed. If you move the Sinner during the wind-up, you haven't actually dealt the attack and will lose it, so you must wait until the execution frame to move. How strong is this? Let's say it takes Hilda, who has 0.75 attack speed, 20 frames to perform 1 basic attack per the chart. By moving her, we can count from the frame she lands in her new tile, thus starting a fresh basic attack, to the moment the basic attack actually fires as 14 frames. This means she has 13 frames of wind-up animation. She executes her attack on the 14th frame, then she has 6 frames of wind-down animation. That means we can move her after frame 14 and force her to start a new attack without losing damage. If we check this list, this is similar to moving Hilda from needing 20 frames per attack, or 0.75 attack speed, to only needing 14 frames per attack, pushing her up to 1.0714 attack speed. This is equivalent to buffing Hilda for 42.85% attack speed by just moving, and why animation cancelling is so highly regarded among molders and considered extremely useful on certain sinners or abilities. So, let's talk about a major practical application of attack speed theory crafting. There are scenarios where attack speed affects the number of hits of an ability, such as Water Blue or Isomer. Isomers is stated explicitly in-game as firing one extra hit every 20% attack speed bonus, but Water Blues isn't explicitly stated. So, how can we calculate her damage? Thanks to tenured researcher Baya Lee on the Minos server, we know that her ult actually has a base attack speed of 2 and adheres to standard frames. That understanding cleanly produces the following table for Water Blue's attack speed breakpoints, and in-game peer review has replicated similar results. The practical function of this discovery is that assuming S5 Water Blue and Celine, you would still need 62.8% more attack speed to hit the 275% breakpoint to deal 30 hits per ult. Eti can grant 30% from a red gem, so you would either have to do some interesting Cassia strats, or use this on a stage that grants over 32.8% attack speed buff to hit the breakpoint. This allows us to figure out whether Eti is worth bringing in stages with Water Blue, and it is in the case of TOA 14, which is currently believed to have an attack speed buff of 40% on the red tile, forming the basis for a critless Water Blue full clear. But lacking that, such as in Starseed Apostle, then we would handle the stage differently. It's through checks like this that we know Celine's attack speed buff is such that it hits many important breakpoints for sinners like Summer, 11, Necresta, and so on, thus showcasing her true strength. Knowledge allows you to make the best use of the resources and money you've invested into your sinners. There is some evidence that the game runs at 30 FPS, but in-game testing doesn't seem like the finer boundaries that 30 FPS would give exist, so we are currently playing assuming that it's 15. Of course, if you have any evidence that 15 FPS is incorrect, or have any more points of discussion to raise, the Ring Research Institute enthusiastically welcomes bright minds to contribute to the field of theory crafting. That's all the time we have today. Thank you for attending. Class dismissed. Whoa, for a moment I felt like I went to a different life where I did my PhD. So weird. Anyway, let's talk about Celine. Celine is a catalyst who specializes in attack speed buffs, with bonuses in damage dealt and also able to deal core breaks and heal, making her very versatile. It's often mistaken that she is only good for attack speed sinners, but she is actually an amazing generic support at S3 and still pretty decent all around even at S1. Though again, S0 is quite cope, so let's dive into her kit to see why. Her basic attack is ranged, dealing a little magic damage. That's it. Celine's characteristic grants her 2 books when she enters the battle, and she obtains 1 more book every 30 seconds. A sinner can have up to 2 books, and you can see them floating around Celine at the start of the fight. By using her ult, she can transfer 1 book to an allied sinner. The book transfer doesn't cost energy or have a cooldown, so you may use it freely. Also, once an ally has full stacks, the game won't allow Celine to transfer more to them, so don't worry about wasting stacks. At level 10 ult, 1 book grants 30% attack speed to the sinner carrying it, so 2 stacks is 60% attack speed. Celine's P1 grants more buffs to the books. For each book an allied sinner is carrying, their damage dealt increases by 6%. Additionally, when a book carrier deals damage, their damage dealt increases 1% up to 20 stacks. So with 2 books, it's 12 plus 20 for 32% damage dealt bonus. This is very easy to maintain full stacks on, so we just take it as a full uptime buff. Celine's P2 heals allies for every 3 times Celine deals damage, mostly through her basic attack. This is a decent amount of healing, and you can use her as a solo healer in most scenarios. However, she cannot deal damage to those immune to magic damage, such as Mat 1 of Dark Zone, so take note of that and make sure you use someone else as a healer in those cases. Celine's ECB gives her a new ult, which strikes in the 3x3 area around all book carriers. This deals a bit of magic damage, and each of these areas deals 1 core damage. One enemy can only take up to 2 core damage total from a single cast of this ECB. So, unfortunately, you cannot just play in a boss's face and deal 6 core damage to them in one hit, but you can position Sinner strategically around the map to core break many mobs at once. The magic immune issue mentioned about her healing also applies to her core breaks. As they are attached to magic damage, the core break doesn't work on enemies immune to magic damage. Fortunately, physical teams tend to have more core break options, so it usually isn't an issue in practice. More importantly though, this ECB triggers flow state for 12 seconds, increasing all book buffs by 20, 30, 40% depending on ECB level. This is so strong, but we'll talk about it later after Shackles. Now, I've said a couple of times that S0 Celine is kind of jank and to get at least S1. This is because Celine's S1 increases the maximum stacks of books to 3 and immediately gives all allied sinners 1 book when the fight starts. This means Celine can immediately heal the whole team from the start and max out stacks on your main DPS and give a sub DPS or Yelena 2 stacks. At S0, you have to wait until 2 minutes, basically, for everyone to have 1 stack, just so she can heal everyone, and then you want to give more books to your main DPS and it's a whole thing and it just feels bad in practice. So I would really say Celine's minimum shackle is S1. Not only that, more books means more buffs, so she ends up buffing way more, and it's just really good value for 1 shackle. Celine's S2 and S5 make each book grant 3% more attack speed. Celine's S3 makes each book grant 10% attack buff for a full uptime 30% attack buff, so S3 is really good. Before you get overwhelmed, here is a chart of the buffs that Celine grants at each shackle level, full uptime and also during ECB. The ECB does work on Celine's S3, making her grant 42% attack buff during her ECB. What does this mean in practice though? Well, as you can see in these clips with these S5 Celines buffing an S0 and S5 Isomer respectively, the difference between having her and not having her is around 800% to 1000% buff just on the ult. By estimating with a chart, though there is a slight difference due to how Isomer's PMO works, you can see a rough guideline as to how much each shackle on Celine increases Isomer's damage. By the way, Celine's book buffs all snapshot successfully onto summons, so while you can't apply them onto summons directly, you can buff them through their owner, making Celine work great with RF Summer and RF 11. This is how the no shield stack Crit 11 was born. You use 11's ECB during the second break, and due to how 11's S3 and Reforge work, if you use the ECB, let's say around 1 minute 7 seconds, they will snapshot the full ECB buffs from Celine and bitch slap that boss non-stop until literally the final core break, only disappearing around 11 seconds left. By that time, you can just use a fresh set of buffs for another set of hands, so it's no problem. Again, if we use a chart to estimate, you can see Celine indeed brings noticeable buffs to any sinner that can make use of attack speed in some way. And even if they can't use attack speed well, like Xiaofeng, through testing with and without an S3 or higher Celine, you can see the difference is still around 200%, double the damage. Moreover, because she works well as a healer, you don't have to give up a slot to Xin or Hamel on teams that can't use her well, such as Xiaofeng, RF Yao, or Arcane Crit, boosting Celine's value in team building even more. In conclusion, Celine is a very valuable sinner and highly recommended to pull. I would strongly encourage getting S1 for a significant boost in both her numbers and ease of use overall, and also recommend chiefs with enough hypercubes or wallet power to pull her to S3 to make her a great generic support that can go into any team similar to Yelena, Tichuan, or S3 Xin. S4 and S5 on Celine are very optional. I would only recommend it for chiefs that want to maul at the highest extremes of the game, in which case you are probably better at the game than me and have made your own builds already. This was a super long video that took a while to make, so I'm very sorry for the wait. I'm also new to attack speed in general, and I received a lot of help from other chiefs, so shout out to everyone in the Path to Yelena Discord, especially Kovrex and YX, and Bailey from the Minnow server for sharing their knowledge and tests. I hope the collective efforts of our molding and balding becomes useful for all players in planning and enjoying the game. Next video will cover Isomer, which will be much simpler, so I will see you there. Bye bye!